Hi everyone, and welcome to my updated Lightning Arrow Deadeye guide. So I've played this build in Arc Nemesis League and already made a video about it back then, and it's still really nice. I really like the build, and I've just spent a lot of hours bringing it up to par with the new patch. There's a few new unique choices that are quite interesting. There's some other improvements, and just like min-maxing it to the teeth basically. I also did write a Maxroll guide for this, so you can find this here. A lot of people asked me what happened to the guide because they saw it live and then it was taken down. So we kind of took the last minute decision to actually not release it officially. But I got the green light to include it in this video. I spent many hours writing this guide. It has a lot of detail about how to progress, how to level, early game gear, mid game gear, end game gear, what to go for. There's the trees as well. There's the links, a leveling section. So everything we really want. That goes into a lot more detail than this video here. So this video is going to be basically just showing like the basics of how the build works and and talking about the trees and how it works. But here you can find like a lot more detail, especially for beginners. So if you're curious on that, you can check it out in the description. There are a few little bugs here because this guide is not officially indexed. So this is just like a direct link basically. And something's a bit weird here, but aside from this, everything is there. So go ahead if you like. So a bit unlucky we didn't have it officially for the release, but we might release it next week or whenever there's like another big bow buff and we're just gonna do another pass on it. Should be fine. But the build still works pretty well. I've done pretty much all of the endgame content back in Arc Nemesis. So that included the Feared, that included all the pinnacle bosses. The Ubers weren't in the game back then, so I didn't actually try them with that. I only logged in and killed the Uber Shaper like yesterday with my build. So it does work, but obviously this is not really the build for Ubers. So this is a mapping character. It is really fast. It is a ranger, so it's not super tanky by default almost. So you can't really expect to do like all the endgame bosses super easy peasy. So this is just something I want to mention. It does work really well while mapping. It feels good, but in bossing, you gotta be careful. You gotta know the fights if you want to defeat the high-end bosses, especially the Uber bosses. You need to have a really strong character. But aside from that, I've leveled this character to level 97 without much issue. So if you just focus on like T16 mapping with some decent gear, you can do that just fine. You can blast even the delirium maps, unless you want to go like all in with like super juiced up 100% delirious. That might be a bit of a problem, but like, moderate delirium effect and T60 maps with League mechanics is very doable. So let's talk about some of the main mechanics of the build. Let's start with the Azeneth's Chant. This is the old version. The new one is Azeneth's Mark. That is like the non-faded unique now. It has basically the same effects with the trigger socketed spells when you attack with a bow. This is extremely important for this build. We can fit in a tornado and also a hydrosphere or potentially some other things that helps us out. So the thing about Lightning Arrow is that it has an AoE effect. So you shoot and when you hit an enemy, it explodes in an AoE. So you can actually overlap those explosions on the same target. And this is why you want that tornado. So you want to stand close to, let's say, a boss, for example, and shoot at it. And you'll see like the tornado spawning all the time. The hydrosphere is also spawning there. It can also be hit. And it also applies exposure for extra damage. And like this, you effectively double your single target damage. The tornado is really powerful. And once you have Azeneth's Mark, which is generally a rather cheap unique, you will notice a massive improvement already. So this is one of the first endgame targets. Then there is the Trinity. So Trinity support is also a super powerful support gem. So it's basically like two support gems in one. First of all, you have like a more damage multiplier based on your resonance, so you can get up to 30% more elemental damage. And then you also get elemental penetration if you have like the minimum resonance at least 25. And the way that this works is you can see it here on the top left corner. You have this icon and it fills up with these different elements. And essentially you have to have at least 2 different elemental damage types that are kind of balanced to get this resonance. So if you look at our damage done by our lightning arrow here, you can see I have like 1700 to 3000 fire damage and like 1300 to 2100 cold damage and like 700 to 8000 lightning damage. So all 3 elements are fairly balanced in their like average numbers. You just need 2 to be balanced. So typically you have a lot of lightning damage because of lightning arrow. And then you want, preferably cold damage because it has a chill effect, it has freezes, this is kind of nice. And it also scales a bit better with the exposure that we get from the hydrosphere, for example. Or also some fire damage. So you can stack all 3 elements. Preferably have at least a little bit of all 3. And as long as you meet this condition, for example, by having a bow similar to this, then you can get this Trinity support to work. So this is a very important and strong mechanic. This really buffs the build. You should try to go for this. Another important mechanic is also the Vengeance Cascade. So this is an anoint. You can see on the amulet here. Ignore this omniscience. This is not affordable these days anymore. It was very affordable in Arc Nemesis, but I didn't actually put it in a new guide, so don't worry. And we have this anoint here, Vengeance Cascade. Attack projectiles return to you from final target. This is quite expensive anoint. It needs 2 golden oils, but it is very powerful. You can see that the arrows basically just come back to you. So especially when you have like other enemies nearby or when you have walls nearby, the arrows just like fly away and then they come back to you. And this is really, really powerful. Also against bosses, for example, where you generally want to stand like point blank because of tornado, because you actually have the point blank keystone, for example. And then the arrows come back and they hit the tornado and the boss again. So this can be, a huge damage bonus. Lastly, we have 2 focus crafts. So there is the chance to deal double damage as a suffix. So you can get it from unveiling weapons, and then you can craft it on the bow. So this is effectively a 30% more damage multiplier while it's active. And with this double damage effect, you also produce bigger shocks. So you do even more damage than this just 30% more. And there's also the crit chance is lucky while focus suffix on the helm. Same thing, you get this from unveiling belts. And you can craft this here and they both combine. So you get this extra focus skill, has a 4 seconds duration, 8 seconds cooldown after it has expired. So you want to try to do like nuke phases with your flasks up and focus on and just blast. Most of the other damage scaling comes from pure stats. So we have crit, we have elemental damage, we have like projectile damage and attack speed. So the typical stuff that just like makes a build. So if you look at my values here, for example, my chance to hit, it's like really good. We don't need to have 100%, for example, because we blind. So blind reduces the evasion rating of enemies. So this is not exactly accurate here. We have, for example, 500% crit multi on my build, 61 crit chance. And then when crit chance is lucky, this goes up to like maybe 80, 85 or something like that. So we have a very high crit chance. Defensively, I've built this character with the typical auras, grace, determination, and also had a defiance banner. I dropped this in a new patch because you have less mana reservation now. But it's not such a huge deal. And I picked up some other like replacements for that. So we have good evasion, we have good armor, so we're well protected against most enemy attacks, especially physical. And with 100% spell suppression, you're also really well protected against most elemental damage sources. And the good part about this is that while you have to invest some more points in spell suppression now, those nodes got heavily buffed, so you can almost entirely cap your spell suppression just from the tree with a few points here, a few points there, and you're good to go, basically. And some of those things are basically like auto pickups anyway for a Deadeye. So for example, Quickstep is right here, you can just pass through and get some spell suppression. You have, for example, Revenge of the Hunted. So there are some of these nodes that you kind of get for free. You want to take 1 spell suppression mastery anyway, for example, so it's not really such a huge deal, and it actually frees up some of the like stat slots and some of the pressure on some of the gear that you have, because now you can stack more resist, you can stack more stats, and it makes it a bit easier. Since we're already on the passive tree, I have the endgame tree here. This is a level 100 tree, so if you want to go all the way, but if you're ending at a low level, you can like remove some of these points here, for example. I also have like first lab, second lab, third lab, the crit spell suppression respec after campaign, and the Uber lab. So I have like a tree at the various points of progression so that you can kind of see like where to go. For example, at the start, when you start with leveling, you path down here through the ranger area. One of the first pickups is precise techniques. So this is a very powerful leveling keystone here, 40% more attack damage, but you never deal critical strikes. And at the beginning, you can't really scale crit. So it barely has a downside. So this is something that we want to pick up right away, along with onslaught, some life here and there, and maybe some accuracy. So here are some accuracy nodes, and you also get some here from finesse. And later on, we can also take accuracy and maybe even the accuracy mastery. So there is a bunch of options to make sure that you have this condition. So while leveling, for example, you always want to keep an eye on your maximum life versus your accuracy rating, and potentially include like a little bit of a precision aura, maybe not like fully leveled, but at least like a few levels to get this boost there to accuracy and to make sure that you have this condition, because it's a huge loss if you don't. Same with point blank. This is another very strong keystone. It is something we keep until the very end. 30% more damage to close range targets. So this just helps a lot with this whole setup of standing close to, let's say, a boss, casting the tornadoes, the point blank kicks in, the chain kicks in, and you just hit the boss multiple times, you do a lot of damage. As we progress to the second lab, we go up here, we take Primeval Force with the chance to freeze, shock, and ignite. So like this you can get especially the shocks despite not doing crits. And you get like another kind of big multiplier here. You can take the increased effect of non-damaging ailments, the accuracy here that I mentioned. Master Fletcher is really powerful, so this whole bow wheel here is really strong. Later on we also take this. And you start popping off here. There's also like the reservation nodes that you can take here. So this is like level 50-ish now, for example. And then the flask nodes, they're not really that important in the campaign yet, but this build, for the most part, does rely on a mana flask. So we have an eternal mana flask, which makes it so that the effect is not removed at full mana. And it will take quite a bit of effort to get rid of that mana flask in the end game. So there are these ring crafts here for minus mana cost on the rings. You can also put this on the amulet data if you have a rare amulet. But without that, at least on 2 pieces, maybe 3 pieces, and various other optimizations, it will be kind of tough to not run a mana flask. So this is why this is included. But in the endgame tree, this is actually removed again, so you free up some more points, you get another flask slot, so you can get a lot more power there later. As you go towards the end of the campaign with the third lab, we go up here to the shadow area, so there's the leech, there's some more life, and then we have forces of nature for their penetration. You can take another elemental mastery. Here's the revenge of the hunter that gives us the grace mastery, and like this we can fit in grace and determination for our defenses. And this is slowly starting to come together here as a full build. Then when you're done with the campaign and you're starting to map in the early maps, like level 70, 75 or so, eventually you're gonna do your respec for crit and spell suppression cap. So we drop some of the non-crit things. So far side is not really that crazy anymore. You can even drop this accuracy stuff here potentially, and the precise technique, of course. So now it's the time to start getting some crit chance and some crit damage. We can pick out the blind node here. It's quite powerful. Blind helps defensively, it helps offensively. There's a really strong mastery. We pick up the spell suppression here and also here with the spell suppression mastery. This is also another 100% extra critical strike chance when you have 100% spell suppression. Very good. King of the Hill, very strong. And also very soon after you can pick up the lethality wheel, for example. So this is like the scaling here where you start popping off in the early maps. And lastly, when you have more points, this is like level 92 now, you can fill up those wheels here. You can go up to the shadow area, get stuff like trickery and more life and these kind of things, and slowly prepare for the endgame tree that has the Lion Eyes Fall. And the Lion Eyes Fall is a very powerful jewel. So this transforms melee effects into bow effects in its radius. So you see this here, we have the claw and the dagger nodes and their masteries as well. They're quite powerful. So this is like the spot to put it. And you get like lots of crit multi here. You get lots of attack speed and extra damage here. You have very powerful mastery. Here you have the life and mana gain on hit. It's very great. And here's also spell suppression mastery. This can also be changed to Cull mastery there. So this is like a really huge upgrade to the build. When you're there, you can also pick up this Chaos Res and the Mastery, for example. There's also one Mastery that gives you Corrupted Blood immunity. So usually I handle this with a flask with Blood immunity. But if you don't want to do this, you can also just path towards this here earlier and take Corrupted Blood immunity if you really like. So that is also an option. So in general, this is not like 100% set in stone. And you can definitely swap a few things around. For example, this part here, with Graceful Assault and Courage is also, not really the craziest, but it does improve the defenses a lot. It does give a lot of quality of life with gearing. So you get spell suppression, you get the onslaught, you get onslaught effect, so you're like fast as hell, you get lots of armor and evasion. It's very nice. And especially defensively, I really like this. But if you want to go for more offense, you can like drop the entire thing, try to get like onslaught, for example, on like a boot craft, and maybe some extra spell suppression. And you could fit in even like an extra cluster. So I have like some clusters here that you can fit there, for example, for more damage. For the gear, I mentioned some things already about the bow of elemental damage. So you mostly want to look for high elemental DPS, especially favored towards cold and maybe fire, and a little bit less than that as lightning, because you already get natural lightning damage from lightning arrow, and you want to make sure that they are kind of balanced for the Trinity support. So make sure that lightning is not like super dominant. Then you have the crit and stuff like this. So a quiver could look like this, just like high life, crit chance. There's also the Veiled mod with chance to gain a frenzy charge on crit. This is really powerful. So early on you can use Blood Rage for that, or you could even use, there's like the Mark Mastery that gives you Cull, and there's also the Mark Note here with Cull, and the Mark Mastery that gives you chance to gain a frenzy charge. So this is like an option early on until you get this here. Then you have the Asenav's Mark, of course. This is like one of the first pickups. I have the Lightning Coil here, so this is like a new addition. I was playing this just with like a rare chest, if you have seen earlier. And here we have the physical damage taken as lightning damage, 50%. This is like a massive bonus to your physical max hit, or a physical damage reduction. So if you look at this here, we have 35k phys max hit. If I just like remove this thing, it goes down to 11k. So even with like a really good like end game chest, it's only like 20k. So especially against physical damage, you are very well protected because of this, because it takes away from the original physical hit and improves your armor scaling as a result. Then we have gloves, nothing special, just like life, res, maybe some other stats. You can put on some spell suppression as Eldritch Implicit. You can put on the Intimidate here. Intimidate is quite powerful, also Eldritch Implicit, so this can be very cheap. We have boots, so also nothing special, just life, speed, resists, some stats. Eldritch Implicits are action speed and maybe the cooldown recovery rate. Here's a Hiri's Truth, so this one is actually upgraded in this patch, so I really like that one. It gives you the Cutting Strike, it gives you level 22 precision skill, it gives you 100% mana reservation efficiency for precision, crit multi, lots of dex, so you get more accuracy from that. So I really like that amulet. It seems to be like a really strong budget option. This is why I put that in here. I just have the old version here, so let's just add that. And yeah, they have like basically everything you want in one. And you can just run the precision with like very little mana reservation. Level 22 precision basically handles all of your accuracy requirements. It gives you some extra crit chance, and you don't really have to worry much about it on your gear, so that you don't have to like, get crazy rings or crazy, jewels or something that have like extra accuracy. Later down the line, you want to replace this with like a yellow amulet that has something like this here. And you can even get mana reservation efficiency here, so that you can fit in the Defiance banner later instead of the precision, for example. So there's like some options like that. Rings, same story, just like stats, especially strength, you need to stack up a lot. A little bit of int, so you want to have like basically one really big int ring, and then you want to have like, some strength ring, some strength belt, and this usually covers most of the stats required. And again, you put life, you put the elemental damage, you put the mana craft, and make sure that your resists are fine. With a Stygian Vice, you can get a source of phasing and blind, so later on you won't need like the blind wheel anymore here, so this can be like completely replaced almost by just this jewel. And yeah, you have phasing, which is just like nice for mapping, so you can like run through enemies. For the flasks, I mentioned already the mana flask, so you want to have the eternal mana flask. This is something that you go for quite early, and then later on you're going to replace that when you have your mana figured out. We have the granite flask, early on also a jade flask, just for like armor evasion, quicksilver of course, a life flask of course. Make sure you get a corrupting blood immunity and also freeze immunity, and maybe some extra like useful stats here, extra armor for example, curse effect for example, and a dying sun. So this is something I would recommend later on. 2 extra projectiles is hard to beat. Here's also the skill setup. So I mentioned most of these things already, the auras, the helmet setup. Here's a sniper's mark, so we trigger this with mark on hit. One thing to note here is that maybe early on when your mana is not like really good, you might have to run with a low level sniper's mark or just cast it manually, because mark on hit adds a really huge mana multiplier. So you have to be a bit aware here and yeah, just maybe keep it low level until later. We have a Molten Shell, so with a Vial version, so we can link this with cast and damage taken to trigger automatically. It's very great protection, especially with a bit of armor. And then Vial Molten Shell you can use whenever you want for like extra defenses against the boss or against like a legion or something. And here are the main links. So this is the main attack. So there's a lightning arrow, and then you can link this to various damage supports. So the Trinity, elemental damage of attacks, inspiration, also reduces the mana cost. You can run a Mirage Archer if you like. I run Chain. I know some people also like Fork. I think that might be even a bit better for like just pure mapping. But if you also care about single target damage, I think Chain is probably going to end up better. For like just bossing, I would recommend Barrage because it just gives you like even more damage. And yeah, if you want like really big area clear, you can also fit in like a GMP somehow. There's like a supplementary Ballista Totem setup. So this is just for like single target or for like rituals, legion, whatever, like stationary encounters. Yeah, this has Lightning Arrow again with Ballista Totem and multiple Ballista Totems and Barrage, elemental focus, elemental damage to attacks. So this is not really like the craziest, it just helps you out a little bit. I know that some people like to do Storm Rain here, so I haven't personally tried this, and it might be a bit like better on single target. And in that case, I would just replace Lightning Arrow with Storm Rain, and the multiple totems probably like increase critical damage, and yeah, like have like a similar setup then. I also do have some notes here, so if you wanna have like a bit of hand holding, here you have some more info about the build, about some options and some things that I've explained and didn't explain. So you can go check it out for the leveling, for mapping, playstyle, etc. So it's all here, and otherwise we have like the even more detailed Maxroll guide that you can go check out. And this is also it for this guide, so hope you enjoyed it. This is definitely one of the more powerful bow builds out there, I guess, and it works pretty well from start to finish, I would say. It's not like super easy, and also not like the cheapest, like, one Exalt budget or one Divine Orb budget these days to like, blast everything and kill like the uber pinnacle bosses or something like that. But for example, when I played it back in Arc Nemesis, I did actually complete the entire Atlas, including the endgame bosses, without like Fiat and stuff, in like 2 Exalts budget or so. So it did work pretty well. And then once I invested more, I think I had like a total character investment of like 20x or so at the end. So yeah, it was totally fine to clear Feared, to clear like the Breach Invitation, for example, and all that stuff. So I'm gonna leave you with this. Have a lot of fun in the Kalandra League. Personally, I can't wait to play it myself. It's looking amazing. And let's see how it will go. Subscribe for more PoE content, and I'll see you guys next time.